Available in paperback at e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Better get the cool slower, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. In a previous video, I talked about how Elon Musk was upset at director Christopher Nolan and said he had no integrity because he cast Luptia Nyongo, a black Oscar-winning actress, in the role of Helen of Troy. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how Luptia Nyongo wasn't the first black Helen of Troy. No, when it came down to the role of Helen of Troy, another black woman played that role way back in 1996 on Xena Warrior Princess. Now, Galen Gorg back in 1996 played the role of Helen of Troy in the Xena episode Beware Greeks Bearing Gifts, and back in 1996 when many of these white male comic fanboys were out here and there was no social media, no one got upset at all as related to Galen Gorg, a black woman, playing the role of Helen of Troy in Xena. No, in fact, no one really cared about Galen Gorg playing that role. No, all we were doing was getting caught up in the fun and the fantasy that was going on in an episode of Xena Warrior Princess, and most fans of that show basically let that episode come and go. Now, this wasn't even the first time a black person was featured in a story like The Odyssey when it comes down to mainstream media. No, Vanessa Williams also played the role of Calypso a year later in 1997. And Calypso also was another character who was also seen and featured as white in many other adaptations of The Odyssey. But in this 1997 version, they decided to feature Vanessa Williams, a black woman, as the role of Calypso. And again, no one batted an eyelash or even cared. No, that miniseries was considered one of the highest rated for NBC at the time, and even won an Emmy for Best Direction, and no one really cared about it outside of the great story and the special effects. And in that same year of 1997, Brandy, a black female singer, was featured in Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella with the late Whitney Houston, and that film again featured a black woman playing the role of a legendary white fairy tale character. And no one really got upset except myself because there was no black prince for this black Cinderella, but that whole version of Cinderella basically was a highly rated movie that many kids went out here and bought on home video back in the 90s and didn't again bat an eyelash related to race. And I also remember the theatrical version of Phantom of the Opera featuring the late Robert Guillaume in the role as the Phantom, playing that legendary character who again was a white character, and again, as Robert Guillaume had his run on Broadway playing the Phantom of the Opera, no one again got upset about so-called race swapping or identity politics whatsoever as related to that theatrical performance that Robert Guillaume gave as he played the Phantom. And it really shows how, when it comes down to these adaptations, back before the days of social media, people weren't getting all bent up and twisted regarding these adaptations. No, many of these adaptations featured black people in these roles, and no one really cared. But these days on social media, many of the YouTube grifters who want to complain about woke, they will go out and get everybody bent out of shape as they're looking to run their con on all of those viewers online. Now, when it comes to these YouTube grifters, what they want to do is go out here and use the whole situation with Luptia Nyongo playing the role of Helen of Troy in an effort to go out here and get themselves some AdSense dollars and clicks and views. Now these grifters, this is all part of their con. What they want to do is go out here and stir up some outrage among many of the racists in fandom, and they want to get many of these racists emotional and riled up over what they see is pop culture being hijacked in their eyes. However, when it comes down to that same pop culture, what they don't talk about is the problem that as related to what they call so-called woke, is that some of those folks basically are inexperienced, and that's why their versions of adaptations really don't go well. But they omit that fact because what they want to do is get you caught up in your feelings as related to their racist and white supremacist rhetoric. And as they get you caught up in their racist and white supremacist rhetoric, they get you so in your feelings that you're thinking this is the end of the world, and as you think it's the end of the world, you think they go out here and then look to use that to pitch their whole comic book or their film or TV show that they're going to try to push as an alternative to the so-called woke entertainment. And usually, in a lot of cases, these guys are just as inexperienced as related to creating entertainment, and the media they create is just as bad, but you wouldn't know that because what they're looking to do is con you into believing they have a viable alternative to Hollywood and their films and comic books and other media, but these guys basically don't have anything different than what's being produced right now. And when it comes down to films like Helen of Troy, these are and the character of Helen of Troy and the Odyssey, that's what I meant to say. When it comes down to the Odyssey as a film is basically an adaptation. And from my years of studying screenwriting, adaptation is about trying to make a version of a story that is based on a producer's vision, and usually that producer who has the money to make their own media, they go out here and make media based on their ideas and their vision for a project, and that's how we get adaptation. And when it comes down to adaptation, it's usually somebody's version of a story, and you can take that version of that story or you can leave that version of that story. These stories aren't, as related to adaptation, are not really considered to be canon. No, this adaptation is someone's version of the story that is being made for film, and as they make that adaptation, again, the audience can either take that version or leave that version depending on how they feel about what's being presented. Now, the Luptia Nyongo as Helen of Troy, to me, really isn't that important, just the same way Galen Gorg wasn't that important to the Xena episode of Beware Greek-Sparing Gifts, because in both cases, Helen of Troy was not a major part of the story. Yes, Helen of Troy did launch 1,000 ships, but when it came down to the Odyssey, people came to see the Odyssey, to see the Greek journey, and they also came to see the action-packed sequences of special effects, like on the island with the sirens, or in the climactic scene of the 1997 version, where Odysseus goes out here and uses his bow to go out here and slay all of the suitors who are going after his wife. That's what people wanted to go see when they go see the Odyssey. No, they're not getting bent out of shape because that's as related to a black woman playing the role of Helen of Troy. No, they came here for the action and the special effects overall. And what many of the YouTube grifters won't tell you is that when it comes down to these adaptations, when it's white folks going out here and making their adaptations, they can go out here and change the race of a character and make that character who was not white into a white person. That's what they did with the movie Gods of Egypt, and they also did it with the movie The Ten Commandments. In both of those cases, there was characters that were being played by white people. Like in the case of the Ten Commandments, we had Charlton Heston playing Moses, an Israelite who is black, and we had Yul Brynner, the late Yul Brynner, playing Ramses, who was playing a black character, and Anne Bancroft playing the role of Nefertiti. All of those characters were black in the Bible, and even Yvonne DiCarlo was playing Zipporah, a woman who is black in the Bible. And also, when it came down to white folks back then with the Ten Commandments, that film is considered to be a classic and an iconic part of American cinema. And no one, again, got upset about that adaptation of the Ten Commandments. But many of these same people, when they heard that many of the characters in the animated Prince of Egypt were going to be featured as darker skinned, these people got bent out of shape. And again, that shows the racism that goes on behind the scenes. Not to mention one Howard Hughes, a billionaire like Elon Musk. Well, he was a millionaire at the time, which was the same as a billionaire. And when it came to Howard Hughes wanted to go out here back in the 50s and make a film about Genghis Khan. And as he made his film about Genghis Khan called The Conqueror, what Howard Hughes did was go out here and cast legendary white supremacist John Wayne, who played in numerous cowboy films of the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s as Genghis Khan. And as he cast John Wayne as Genghis Khan, it's historically known that this was one of the greatest efforts of miscasting, but that didn't stop Howard Hughes back in that time from going out here and casting John Wayne as Genghis Khan, an Asian man, and you had a white supremacist playing an Asian man in a role such as Genghis Khan, and not a single American got upset about the idea of this white man playing Genghis Khan. But when a white producer decides to cast a black woman in 2025, many of these YouTube grifters want to go out here and get upset. They want to go out here and stir people's ire and get them all irate as related to the casting of Luptia and Nyongo, when they are being disingenuous, because back in 1996, in the early days of the internet, no one got upset at all about Galen Gorg in that Xena Warrior Princess episode that came out in 96. They didn't get upset about Vanessa Williams in NBC's The Odyssey in 1997, and you shouldn't get upset regarding any black person playing a role in any sort of feature. I mean, when it comes down to these adaptations, as something I know as someone who has studied the entertainment industry, they basically come around every 10 to 15 years, and you can pick and choose the version that you want to go out here and watch. You can go out here and again check out the 2004 film Troy, which features Brad Pitt. You can go out here, get the 1997 The Odyssey, and you can also go out here and get, I think, a 1920s version and even a 1950s version. I mean, there are as many versions of The Odyssey as there are versions of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic that came out in the early 80s basically is completely different from the 1987 animated series, and the 1987 animated series is different from the 2003 animated series, and that animated series is different from the 2010 animated series, and that's even different from the 20-teens live action movies and the 1990 live action movie. When it comes to adaptation, again, you get different visions from different creators as related to a character, and as you get different visions from different creators, they create their interpretation of a story, and as they create their interpretations of a story, they present their idea of what they think the story is, and there's no one canon version of any story, no one version of a story. And I know this from a fact as related to studying screenplays with Sid Field's screenplay, and studying adaptation. And even if I were to do my own versions of a character, it would be different from what another artist would see. And this is something I have seen when I go out here and hire different artists. I can hire one artist and they will interpret Isis one way and another will interpret her another. And when it comes down to adaptation, there's no one unique version, no one canon version. No, people can go out here and make different versions, and you just and if you like it or not, that's up to you. That's just how it is. But don't let YouTube grifters keep you from seeing a film based on their racism, because the whole idea of saying something is woke is basically their code words so that they can participate in racism, and usually anti-black racism. Usually what these guys want to do is go out here and cause a lot of alarm because they want fantasy to be mainly white and mainly male, and they're upset about many foundational black Americans or other peoples coming into the genre of fantasy, and they are upset about us coming into this genre where they considered it to be their safe space. Now, when it comes down to the whole issue of Luptia Nyongo being Helen of Troy, it's not something I really care about. No, what I really care about is the passive aggressiveness that Hollywood does when it comes down to these type of films. When it comes down to these type of films, what they will do is go out here and passively cast a black person in one of these roles, but aggressively keep black people from being behind the camera to be able to tell these type of stories. That's what they do in these cases. They don't really want us to see a Chio Hodari Coker come out here with something like a Luke Cage. No, because when Chio Hodari Coker came out here with his adaptation of Luke Cage, it wasn't that much like the Power Man comics. No, he used the Power Man character's name and Luke Cage name, but everything else was completely different, and he really tapped into black culture and the experience of black people to make his version of Luke Cage. That's what happened with Chio Hodari Coker. Again, when he made his adaptation, he wasn't featuring Luke Cage as some guy with an afro talking jive like in the old 1970s comics. No, his Luke Cage was a lot more polished and sophisticated, and the politics going on around the character and characters like Cottonmouth and Black Mariah was completely different from the comics, and that led to people having a great experience that basically was far different from the comic books. That's what many of the folks don't want you to have as related to black characters in black fantasy. So yeah, they'll throw out a token Luptia Nyongo to keep a producer like Chio Hodari Coker from being able to come out here with a Luke Cage. What they'll do is, again, passively, cast Luptia Nyongo, cause some outrage among many of these YouTube grifters, and basically say, oh, this film failed, so we can't make anything that features black characters. Meanwhile, shows like Luke Cage can go out here and be huge successes that break the server of Netflix, and films like Black Panther can become the #1 film of 2018, showing there is an audience for black fantasy and black science fiction. But this Hollywood really is disingenuous and doesn't want to go out here and make those type of films. No, they don't want to make those type of films, but you have guys like Elon Musk getting upset and then saying, hey, you shouldn't do this. But the whole thing is, here's a billionaire with over $100 and some billion who basically could go out here and finance his own movie 10 times. And if he has an issue with a film, he could do like many of the YouTube grifters and take his money or somebody else's money and make his own movie. That's what he could do. The same way Howard Hughes made his own version of Genghis Khan in The Conqueror, featuring white supremacist John Wayne. But many of these people, again, are disingenuous, and again, they really don't want to see black people in roles where they can be presented with power. They don't really want you to see a black person in a role where they can be seen as, again, powerful, because Helen of Troy was considered to be influential to launch 1,000 ships, but I find it interesting people weren't upset about Galen Gorg playing that role in 1996, but these guys are bent out of the shape in 2026 regarding this Luptia Nyongo, an Oscar-winning actress, playing this role. I mean, I find it funny that these guys will get upset about this whole situation with Luptia Nyongo, but they don't get upset when white people are gods of Egypt. They don't get upset when a white supremacist is Genghis Khan. They're not talking about how that's not canon, and it really shows how disingenuous these folks are regarding this whole situation as related to casting and ethnicity. Now, if you want to check out some of my action-packed fantasy fiction that features black characters, you can pick up books like The Temptation of John Haynes, the John Haynes series, the Isis series, the Esteem series, and my Black Goth Spinsterella series, and see black characters in a completely different world and a larger picture of black life. You can find all of those books on Amazon.com. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos taking YouTube grifters to the barbecue, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Support black-owned and black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.